Right, good morning to my wonderful Year 2 law students. This is a very quick, short introduction to contract law. Quick 5 minutes. Just come back from my run, but hopefully I should be able to summarise some of the basics for you. So in contract law, I think the key thing to remember is you must always think about the definition of a contract. A contract is simply a legally binding agreement between two or more parties which the courts will enforce. Now, the next thing to appreciate is the component parts of a contract. So you're looking for somebody making an offer, the other party accepting the offer. There's evidence of consideration, and also both parties intend to enter into the contract. After that, it's really being aware of the different components. So being able to define what an offer is. An offer is simply the first step towards forming a contract, or a willingness to be bound to be bound by another person's acceptance. I think the key thing about offers is sometimes, so I'm just checking where I'm going, I think I'm going that way. Right, the key thing about offers is sometimes there might be something which looks like an offer, such as an advertisement or a display of goods in a shop, and they're really not offers at all. They're invitations to treat. An invitation to treat is simply where one party makes an offer, so one party invites another person to make an offer. So always establish who makes the offer, and then you can hopefully identify who accepts that offer. So typical examples, as I mentioned before, of invitations to treat are advertisements, apart from Carlisle, where an advertisement was classed as a unilateral offer. Also display of goods in a shop. So when you walk into a shop, bearing in mind that it's the customer who makes the offer, because the goods are invitations to treat. You've got auctions as well, so when the auctioneer starts to display items on sale, the lots are actually invitations to treat, apart from where items are being sold without reserve. Now, if we move on very quickly to acceptances, acceptances are simply, I'm trying to get this, why is it moving that way? Oh, there you go, that's better. Right, okay, so acceptances, the definition of an acceptance is simply embracing all the terms of the offer. I think that's the key thing to remember. If you change the terms in your acceptance, you're making a counter offer, and based on Hyde and Wrench, a counter offer cancels the original offer. So acceptance must be unconditional. The other thing to remember is acceptance must be communicated. In Tories and Miles Far East is the case, and it's very important that you remember that silence doesn't constitute an acceptance, and that's confirmed in the case of Feldhouse and Bindley. What else about acceptances? You've got to remember about the postal rule. The postal rule, oh, watch where I'm going, it's a bit muddy. The postal rule is simply where any acceptance in the form of a letter confirms the contract when the letter is posted. The risk the other party, the offerer, runs is that they may not receive the letter at all, but that doesn't matter. So don't forget the postal rule. Right, I'm lost now. Okay, right. The postal rule simply states that the acceptance is effective once it's posted. Where do I go from here? Right, do I go back up here? Right, sorry guys, I think I'm a little bit lost. But right, okay, so don't forget, if it's the postal rule, I'll go this way. If it's the postal rule, please remember that the acceptance is effective once the letter is posted. Sometimes, and in these days, you use text messages, you might use an email, so instantaneous forms of communication are different. The other party, the offerer, has to receive the email or the text message in their inbox, and it has to reside there for a reasonable time. If they don't read the message, then the acceptance takes effect. Right, very quickly on to consideration. 3 definitions of consideration. You've got price paid for a promise, you've got an exchange of something valuable. Sorry, forgive me, I'm looking everywhere, but just trying not to slip. You've also got benefit and detriment. So one party suffers a benefit, the other party suffers a detriment. 3 types of consideration. My arms are aching a little bit. Right, 3 types of consideration. You've got executory consideration in bilateral contracts, so both parties exchange something of value rather. Then you've got executed consideration, normally applies to unilateral contracts. And then you've got past consideration, which is normally an examinable area. So past consideration is simply where an act is completed and then another party makes a promise. That promise is made for nothing. In other words, if they break that promise, there's nothing you can do. Suitable cases are Rema Cardle. Have a look at Lampley and Braithwaite, and also Re cases patents. Both Re cases patents and Lampley and Braithwaite are exceptions to the rule on past consideration. The other thing you've got to remember is privity. So privity simply states that you cannot benefit from a contract unless you're part of that agreement. And that's why if you have a look at Tweddle and Atkinson, we drew the triangle. And because Tweddle was the beneficiary but hadn't contributed anything of value, he couldn't claim anything from that contract. What else do we have? Right, so when it comes to consideration, there are two key words: adequacy and sufficiency. Consideration doesn't have to be adequate, it only has to be sufficient. It has to have some economic value. So again, the key thing to remember is that part payment of a debt under the common law is not sufficient consideration. So if somebody owes you £10, they agree to accept £8, they can come back for the £2. Now, the other thing to remember is part payment of a debt in equity is different, because based on the rules of fairness, it is classed as sufficient consideration, provided the other party relies on that promise. So that's everything about consideration. Trying to think of anything else that you might need for consideration. Right, read the case of Williams and Roffey, because that confirms that sometimes performance of an existing contractual duty can be sufficient consideration. So please read Williams and Roffey. Right, next and final point, and I'm making sure I've not gone too far, I don't want it to be more than 5 minutes. The next point is to do with intention, and I think really with intention, I think there are two main settings in which you decide whether both parties intend to create an agreement. So agreements made in social family settings are generally not considered to be legally enforceable, but have a look at the cases of Balfour and Balfour and the rebuttal in Merit and Merit. And generally speaking, agreements made in business settings are intended to be legally binding, but most of the time, or some of the time rather, they may not be. Right, my arms are aching now, so I'm going to put the phone down, but please watch this video. Please read chapters 19 and 20 in the Year 2 law textbook. Have a great Easter, and I will, wherever I can, I'll post another video shortly. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.